everyone. We're the Green Spoon Martyr Hospitality, Alcohol, and Leisure Industry Group, here to do a 2022 year-end review heading into 2023. Our group represents all tiers of the alcohol beverage industry, from retail vendors to wholesalers to suppliers. My name is Jim Rao. I'm a partner within the group, focusing on Miami and Miami Beach and our national practice. And here with me today are two other lawyers from our group.
Josh Remedios. Good afternoon, everybody. I spent a lot of time working with retailers throughout the state of Florida and a little bit nationally as well.
My name is Brad Berkman. I'm also an alcohol beverage attorney in the group. I spend a large part of my day representing upper tier industry members. By definition, that would include manufacturers or suppliers of alcoholic beverages and distributors, and a lot of their regulatory compliance and legal issues.
And we're here today to look at the biggest impacts and trends in the industry that we've seen over the last year, and things to look at for 2023 for the industry, and in particular our clients. What we've seen primarily in 2022 is, especially in South Florida, continued rapid growth, particularly in the high-end restaurant industry. In terms of impacts on the industry, we've seen The biggest trend we've seen in 2022, particularly with retail vendors, is the continued rapid growth of the high-end restaurant industry. In terms of things to look for in 2023 that we've learned from 2022, the biggest issue would be to identify your development and opening team early. Do your due diligence before you head into a lease or purchase of a building for a hospitality use, and get in touch with your design professionals and your attorneys that will be handling that matter, so that you can be prepared when you get to permitting and licensing. Some other trends we've seen.
So as Jim mentioned, 2022 was a year of massive growth in South Florida and Miami especially. There's a saying in retail that go where the people are. And that's just what people have done, not only from other parts of the country, but from outside the United States as well. One of the biggest developments, for example, in South Florida and Miami is Miami World Center. It's going to be 300,000 square feet of mixed use retail. It'll feature restaurants, storefronts, and residential. Capitalizing on a large industry trend of South Florida being a hotspot because of the tax incentives, because of the warm weather year round. A lot of people with their eyes on moving to this area have seen that not only can they develop hotels or condominiums, but they see a need for retail spaces. We've got a cap on the amount of growth we can do here in South Florida, just because the nature of the landscape. You can only go so far east and west, and everybody wants to be in the heart of Miami. And what we've seen is more and more high rises going up with retail on the ground floor, and we continue to see more and more clients in the development stages. So we're going to see much more of that in 2023, especially on the retail side. Brad, I don't know what you've seen on the federal side or nationally.
Well, it's not necessarily federal or national, but it's a great question. Really, it's more industry specific, and that would be the alcohol beverage industry. And as the viewer or listener might know, this is a highly regulated industry at the federal level and at the state level. And these rules and regulations really must be adhered to. But the interesting thing is that one of the more recent trends and I guess significant impacts of the industry, and this is really something that's universal, is the effect of technology on alcohol beverage in general. That is the sale of alcohol beverage and the use of really our computers, if you will, and telephones to effectuate sale and marketing of alcohol. And industry participants non-traditional industry participants are finding really unique ways of working within a compliant structure, but sort of pushing that structure outward to take advantage of technology and sell alcohol in a relatively non-traditional manner, I should say. So, one of the more interesting aspects of the work that I do is helping these types of industry members or clients really develop compliant structures that operate on a technological platform, akin to almost like social media, if you will. Very interesting, and it brings in a lot of competing legal concepts at the state level, federal level, this notion that we call, or legal concept we call Tide House. And I think that as we progress into 2023, we're going to see more market entrants in that sector, that is technology and alcohol, really pushing the envelope, if you will, of regulation and compliance. And our interesting job is to take those regulations and the business interests of our clients and bring them together so our clients are behaving according to the law, but also maximizing their business revenues.
So when we speak about 2023 as well, I think there's some challenges that we face ahead. There's a lot of uncertainty in the hospitality realm as far as hiring employees. Staffing has always been an issue since the start of COVID. I think we're going to see more and more of that in 2023. But the uncertainty that lies ahead with the economy is going to play a big role as well. We've got massive amounts of development, a lot of money being spent on construction and redevelopment of existing spaces. I just don't know if there's going to be a continued spend once people realize that there's not as much money available by local residents to go out and spend. We've seen a lot of people coming down here from other cities and other states, but what about the local residents?
Right. It's an interesting thought, but one of the interesting things, again, as it applies to the area that I practice in, is that Josh opened or started with an adage, and on my side there is an adage that alcohol sales do well in difficult economic times as well as good economic times. So from this part of our practice area, we're seeing more activity, I think, regardless of local economic circumstances and even national economic circumstances. Even as we move into the recession, I mean, people are still, that is, entrepreneurs and well-established businesses are still introducing new brands and new categories and unique products that again have to fit into this compliance and regulatory model that we guide our clients on. So we're seeing growth there, and I think it'll continue.
I think you brought up a good point. The pandemic showed us a number of things that retail alcohol sales still do well, package sales and delivery still does well. I think we've seen a lot of that in the hotel setting throughout 2022, and what we're probably going to see again in 2023. There was, of course, a large period of declining hotel sales when travel stopped. But what grew is a term called leisure, where it's business and leisure travel together. People that saw the ability to work from home and were forced to go on business trips because no longer do you see the business travel being as a large sector in the market. But when people do have to travel for business, they're making extended vacations out of it. They're taking their families with them, or they're staying for the business week and then continuing into the weekend. So hotels in South Florida especially have done really well throughout 2022. I think we'll see that in 2023 as well.
I think we will. And to build upon the issues related to the economy, something that we do for property owners is advise them to stay flexible in terms of being able to pivot with whatever operators they may have that come and go as the economic trends change, which is important because virtually every mixed-use development has an alcohol beverage use.
So to close on this, what do you guys think of the biggest takeaway or the biggest tip that you can provide to the industry out there as a whole?
That's a good question. And again, I'm going to address the question according to the specific legal framework I operate in. Again, that's sort of upper tier industry members or client base, I should say. So I guess there are two things that I would suggest that my clients or potential clients sort of pay attention to, or definitely pay attention to. One would be introduction to new products specifically, and in a more pointed fashion, formulation of those products and how those products are advertised to the general public. What I mean by that is this. So it's one of the trends I'm seeing, and I started to see in 2022 that I think will continue in 2023, are plaintiffs bringing causes of action against producers of alcoholic beverage for the purposes, or rather I should say under deceptive and unfair trade practice laws in the various states. Virtually every state has one of these acts. And just as an example, on your labels, if a product has a particular cocktail name, as an example, that might be called a margarita. And in fact, if it doesn't have tequila in it, but it is labeled a margarita, there have been instances where plaintiffs have brought action under these acts, suggesting that tequila, in fact, should be in a drink called margarita. And since it is not, it's deceptive use. And although some of these cases are not yet getting into court, they are ending in fairly significant settlement agreements that are requiring out of pocket by defendants. And I think it's important and incumbent on myself and our clients to label their products accordingly and carefully with these acts in mind. The other issue I think in my area is going to be a greater role for the FTC or Federal Trade Commission in terms of advertising. Again, going back to technology that I brought up earlier and the role of social media and influencers and how they're increasingly being used to promote alcohol. There are relatively strict standards for advertising of alcohol that have not been particularly enforced by the FTC, though the FTC has the authority to do that. The more, I suppose, I don't want to use this word, but the more influencers push these rules, the more they, challenge the permissible activities, I think the greater the likelihood the FTC is going to use its enforcement powers and use its ability to fine. So I think that making sure our clients understand these rules, act accordingly, and defend them if and when it becomes necessary is something I predict we might see more of coming into 2023.
I think you bring up some good points. As the industry continues to grow, government's always behind. Government's behind in technology, but government's also behind in enforcement and administration. We've seen slowdowns in processing applications for licensure from city permitting throughout the board in 2022, both in the city, the county, and the state levels. I think that's going to be something that's going to change in 2023. Not so much in terms of issuance of licenses and permits or progressing items through application processes, but in the enforcement realm. As more and more operators come here to South Florida, there's going to be a need for task forces to go out to ensure people are operating in compliance with city and state law. I think that also brings up a good industry tip. And when people are looking at spaces for retail lease, we've seen over 1 million square feet of retail space being taken off the market in the last quarter of this year alone, or 2022 alone. You're going to have more and more challenges as an operator finding a location that works. So zoning is going to come into play. That's what we're here for in this hospitality and alcoholic beverage group, helping people find creative solutions for locations that ordinarily on its face may not look like it's ripe for licensure. We can find solutions and workarounds that may make that fit the business model. And Jim, if you want to close that up.
Be prepared to deal with an increasingly strict regulatory framework whenever you're going to have an alcohol beverage use, either as a property owner or an operator, which is what we're here for.
Thank you and have a great 2023.
Thank you.
Cheers.